morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're getting started just a minute late, but we'll keep it just to 30 minutes and be respectful of your time. So sorry to get a little bit of a late start. Just a few quick things before we get started. The webcast you're attending today is the hidden cost of a free tool, and we're going to talk about specifically Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And we will be asking a few poll questions throughout the presentation, so those should pop up on your screen. If you could respond to those, it helps us guide the conversation a little bit better to better understand the audience that we have today. Additionally, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask those. We'll try to answer them throughout the presentation, but we'll also spend a couple minutes doing a Q&A session at the end. You can use the Q&A or the chat feature up on your screen to ask those questions. Also, toward the end of the presentation, we'll let everybody know how you can get a pair of free Skull Candy earbuds. So stick around for that. And here in the room with me today, we have quite a group here. We have Alan Marsh, our CTO, Eric Nymark, our systems engineer, Spencer Dunford, our director of sales, and CEO and founder Aaron Suzuki. I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Aaron to get started today.
Thanks, Heidi. So we wanted to talk about MDT specifically. We've had many customers ask about it or have tried to contrast and compare our product with MDT, or have tried using MDT and had varying degrees of success. Our position on MDT, to be fair, is that it's really a pretty robust tool set and has some unique advantages, particularly in that it has no license cost associated. But what we wanted to be able to discuss is the other costs associated with going this route, and it's not necessarily as straightforward as it may seem on the surface to first-time users. So we'll talk about how this factors into what we see as the current landscape and some of the pros and cons. We'll give you some ideas for maximizing the use of MDT if you still decide to go that way, and of course we'll talk about how our solution differs a little bit, and hopefully we'll leave a couple minutes at the end for Q&A. So a quick background on our organization. We started out in IT services and continue to deliver a reasonably significant volume of business. We've got about 100 people in total and have been doing this for about 10 years. And beginning about 4 years ago, we started seeing some recurring problems that we could fix with software, mostly around virtual machine automation. And that gave us a lot of insight into IT direction and industry trends around virtualization. As we embellished and enhanced that tool, doing more around distribution of virtual machines as well as deployment, we were just a step away from addressing OS deployment end-to-end, both for virtual machines, physical machines, client and server operating systems. And that was the genesis of SmartDeploy, which now addresses any organization with deployment needs regardless of size, sector, or industry. So as we go about discussions with customers, we see a lot of recurring themes still, and everybody wants IT to be more efficient. And they're looking to simplify tool sets to make the task easier for more people to be able to use IT efficiently with less effort, and ideally reducing IT teams or budgets, or allowing IT people to focus on strategic projects rather than some of these ordinary production tasks that have historically been extremely time-consuming. The landscape that we see technically is that diversification is increasing. So even as organizations standardize on a manufacturer or even a model, as you stick with that model over time, it's improved and enhanced, and a next generation of that device is released. So within our relatively small organization, we're currently, even though we've standardized on Lenovo laptops, for example, we have 6 different models of that same, or 6 different generations of that same laptop, and those all pose different challenges in terms of how they're managed. People are embracing virtualization, and although there's a lot of excitement and energy around desktop virtualization, it seems increasingly that people are embracing the notion that it is not a panacea and that it plays a role, and an important one, but it only fulfills part of the picture of the desktop. Likewise, BYOD and the exciting announcement just yesterday about the Microsoft Surface device enriches and emboldens this discussion, I think, considerably, that there will be more and more people bringing more diverse devices into the environment. So that causes some increasingly heterogeneous desktop landscape attributes, as well as kind of complicating the management picture. As far as what's happening with those devices, we have migration, and people are in various states and considering how to deal with Windows 8 or getting everyone off of XP and onto 7. Many of our customers are still running XP and buy our product to deploy XP. And people are looking at it saying, hey, this might be a good time to consider the toolkit that we have and what we're using to do all of this work. And in the process, evaluating virtualization and where that fits, as well as evaluating other deployment tools and desktop management tools in general, for that matter. So one of the first places people often look is MDT, because it's free and Microsoft has a pretty big bullhorn and is able to make this widely known. The purpose of it is pretty straightforward. MDT is there to help people mass deploy Windows, and it leverages the Windows Automated Installation Kit, which is a pretty robust baseline of tools and an API in order to facilitate the deployment of Windows. It also hooks into the Windows Deployment Services and the Windows Server Platform. MDT is a lot of guidance, as well as some tools that help you use the Wake and WDS to mass deploy Windows. There are some benefits to using MDT. It is designed to be very flexible. It allows you to do things a lot of different ways. And as a result, it allows you to scale your deployment solution. You can use MDT in a way that allows it to be hardware independent, which is also very powerful. And there is no license cost. So those are some pretty compelling reasons. The drawbacks, however, are that it can be very time consuming. If you install MDT, you probably don't know where to start. You have to do a lot of reading and a lot of ramp up. And it assumes a high degree of technical knowledge and expertise, or you have to gain that knowledge and expertise and insight. So you'll invest a lot of time getting the solution and tool set baselined. You'll invest a significant amount of time in the imaging process, a particularly large amount of time in driver management, and there's also a component of ongoing maintenance, and we'll talk about some of these in the coming slides. But another piece of this is that there may be a variety of hard expenses associated with an implementation of MDT. You might outsource this work. You might decide that this is the right tool, or ask or be referred to this tool by an IT service provider. So you might have someone doing this for you and you're writing checks to them, or you might have an MDT expert come and train your team, or you may rely on an IT service provider to support the solution long term. So in addition to the soft costs of your time or your team's time, there's also the checks that you'll write to buy other people's time. So the question we're really asking is, what is your time worth? And the majority of customers that we talk to place a very high value on their time. And so we'll talk about what that means in the next few slides. MDT provides a workbench. SmartDeploy provides a set of wizards. The challenge of the workbench is that it does require a certain technical skill set. There's a lot of scripting involved. There's a significant amount of effort to get it stood up and set up. And if you're not familiar with it, or you're new to the environment, or new to deployment in general, there can be a long ramp-up time to get productive with it. Moreover, as the team changes or you hand this off to other people, there could be some potential ongoing training time that results in additional cost. Likewise, as you march down the road with MDT, you can't buy a support agreement. That isn't to say that Microsoft or your IT service provider wouldn't be eager to support you, but there's definitely a cost associated with that, either in the cost of your enterprise agreement with Microsoft or the other licensing or support programs that you buy from Microsoft, or the support agreements you have in place with your MSP or your IT service provider. There are many good forums, and there are some really good ones, but that can be also time-consuming and a big drain on trying to figure out where to go to get the answer you need, and then troubleshooting that, trying to implement and test that the solutions proposed are viable for your environment. So imaging is one of the first places where you start as you create a solution with MDT. And the image creation process and updating images can be painful. And I'll turn it over to Eric here in just a second to talk about some of the details. But one of the benefits of MDT is also one of its great drawbacks. Because MDT is so flexible, you can use it in almost any environment and in any way. It's also a drawback because it introduces a very high probability of error. So Eric, do you want to take a couple minutes and elaborate on imaging and what the implications of that are?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Aaron. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's a self-service tool set, which doesn't really offer a linear path through the tools themselves. They're offered many different ways to create images or create your deployment packages from the start, and that could lead you down a road later that maybe isn't exactly what you thought you were getting into. But image creation, some of the main things that we see as far as from customer feedback and using the tools ourselves are that image creation and maybe a sysprep and capture. So that's kind of the task sequence that MDT would use to create an image. Offer varying degrees of time consumption and updatability. So sysprep is run while you're capturing the image. Sysprep is inherently destructive to the master reference machine that you're capturing. So updatability over time as you get this golden, perfect master reference machine, and then you degrade that, or you run sysprep on it, which generalizes the environment, and then you start over walking through the steps of sysprep, getting everything set up the way you had it before so that you could capture it again, which is obviously going to cost you some time in the long run. And sysprep also has a limitation as to how many times it can run. There's ways around that limitation, but also, it's extra time on the technician's part to go through, learn these things, instead of just having a best practice built in.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the key takeaways there is that the destructive nature of some of these things, although it can be worked around, adds to that both technical requirement and additional time. So again, it goes back to this investment of time and ongoing investment of time. Next, driver management. This is one of the biggest pain points we hear from universally all of our customers and prospective customers, and even people who use MDT and our MDT devotees talk about what they'd like to see different in this process. Eric, do you want to explain a little bit about this? I mean, there are some good there's some good attributes architecturally, but this is still a place where it can be extremely time-consuming.
Right, yeah. This is one of the biggest complaints that we hear about any imaging process, and it's one of the biggest considerations with imaging in general. You obviously want to limit the amount of images that you have, which hardware-independent imaging or having the ability to take one image from one reference point and put that out to any different type of hardware comes in really handy, and MDT does provide you the mechanism to do that. However, again, it's not a linear path. There's many different ways of implementing hardware management to varying degrees of success. You can do something traditional, like have hardware and image software support tied into one image package. And that's, going to increase the amount of images that you maintain because you're maintaining them not only based on the applications and the operating system and settings that are within them, but the hardware itself, so you manage an image per hardware device. And that was the traditional mindset around driver management. And that's one of the things that MDT and newer deployment technologies try to fix. So with MDT, you could also import custom drivers, which can be task sequenced onto a deployment so that you can have one image that can deploy to any device. But again, you're left to your own devices here. So you're manually downloading drivers, extracting them. We've done numerous different webcasts on driver management, and it's a really involved process to get exactly what you need and get it set up perfectly. And it's not always just the driver itself that you need. In some instances, keeping with the Lenovo ThinkPad series, you need application installs for functions like the hotkeys to get the device up and working properly every time so that you have a reliable, repeatable process. And then continuing down that varying models of driver management, you have options of creating machine-specific groups which help to split out the drivers so that they're just going down to a certain device, but you're maybe updating those drivers over time, and you don't ever know what you're going to end up with on the endpoint 100% every time, which could lead to issues. Maybe you see a blue screen because some driver was wrongly imported that doesn't work properly with the device. And that actually, as crazy as it sounds, is a best case scenario with driver management and getting the wrong drivers to a device, because the other scenario is you may end up installing the wrong drivers on a device. They work, plug and play kind of figures it out, but hardware vendors provide different device drivers. So the same device in a Lenovo machine may have a different driver than that of which is in a Dell device, just because the manufacturers are doing different things with those models. And this could lead to random help desk problems that are hard to identify the source of.
Right, so there's a reliability piece there, right? And that's, we're careful not to say that MDT is unreliable, because it can be highly reliable, but it's dependent upon the individuals who are standing up the solution to build in that reliability, and there are things that may take you by surprise that introduce reliability issues that then cause downstream problems that can ultimately be a disruption to the business, which is the antithesis of what IT's objective is, and that is another potential and very serious problem. So a few thoughts before we start talking about SmartDeploy in any detail, a variety of tips for using MDT. The first is virtualization, and it's a very simple proposal, which is use a VM as your reference machine. And of course, Eric, the question is why? Yeah,
starting from a virtual machine gives you the best, cleanest starting point from a hardware information perspective. Virtualization software only presents a limited subset of the actual hardware devices that end up in the machine. So physical versus virtual, you're going to have less hardware information in there. And most times, those virtualization software manufacturers actually use drivers that are in box with the operating system. So they present those devices that already have driver coverage, so you're not making changes to the base operating system as it is. And then on top of that, kind of tying back to the image creation and sysprep process, you have the ability to use snapshots. Can't really do that on a physical machine unless you capture an image of it, which again is a time-consuming process. So snapshots can really save your life if you want to go back, revert changes, or you ran your sysprep and capture process. Now you want to revert back to where it was in sysprep so that you can actually make updates.
There's one other kind of benefit that customers like about VMs is that generally they're free. And there's several virtualization software types that have no licensing costs, and you can use them no problem. So it saves customers that are generally used to buying or dedicating the specific models they ultimately want to image to their device library. So it's a little more portable, adds to the flexibility, and reduces cost ultimately.
So in the interest of time, we'll kind of skip ahead here to the last couple pieces. I mean, the main piece is make a plan and stick to the plan, both a short and long-term plan, and consider the time and cost that's going to go into this all up, and really be thorough in evaluating solutions. And it may be worthwhile to consider some alternatives, and also acknowledging that infrastructures are changing, and the landscape is changing with the other things that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So with all that said, our product, SmartDeploy Enterprise, utilizes many of the same architectural, well, a couple important architectural components as MDT. MDT, and there was a question about this, uses the Windows imaging format, which is Microsoft's single instance storage, file-based image format that came out in the Vista time frame. It's the same format that's used to install Windows off of the DVDs that you get from a retail supplier. So it is known to be reliable, and it's used by the originating manufacturer of the product. It's short of being open source, it's an open standard, and because of the flexibility of it, we thought it would be a very good idea to utilize that as well. The different thing that SmartDeploy does is narrows down the starting point. So we are able to entertain nearly any deployment scenario because we have a very linear, predictable process and framework from which we start, including driver management. So out of the box, the product follows best practices. Moreover, we're able to provide professional support, and as a result of both that out-of-the-box readiness and the professional support, you can have less sophisticated, less experienced technicians using this more capably than you may be able to have with MDT out of the box. Moreover, the feedback we've received from our customers consistently is they were able to consolidate the team and have their workers working on strategy and other large infrastructure projects and move off of the deployment tasks more quickly or get reallocated to different teams altogether. And the way that we're able to do this is by turnkeying the driver management process and streamlining the imaging process. So updates are a cinch, drivers are right every time, all the time, and it can be as simple as a wizard through which you go next, finish, both on the pre-imaging tasks as well as the deployment process in the pre-installation environment. And we've done a couple other interesting things like running sysprep during deployment so that the reference computer is at no point requiring rebuilding. So there are a lot of simple time-saving attributes built into the product. We did a comparison with a third party called Passmark Software out of Australia and compared 4 leading products, and among them SmartDeploy was the fastest by a significant margin. And the reason for this was largely attributable to driver management. And in that regard, MDT took the most setup time as well as the most time to take care of driver management tasks. Acronis and Symantec products had some of the boot critical devices available, but they didn't take care of the rest of the picture. MDT was able to address the other parts of the picture, but again, it was left up to the technician to figure out the whole driver picture and being able to choose the right drivers to apply at the right time to the right device. With SmartDeploy, all of that's taken care of. So at scale, as you address more and more computer types within an organization, the margin widens considerably. And the reason for this is that the product is modular. We are able to work with or independent of your infrastructure, and we decouple the device drivers and the other hardware-related files and executables from the software image, and using WMI filtering, apply that at deployment time so that all of the buttons on all of your different laptops work exactly as prescribed, and no unnecessary drivers are added. We had a very interesting experience at TechEd where we had a customer from Qualcomm approach us and describe exactly how their world changed by using SmartDeploy, and the number of different tools they tried to work with and even bought in order to get their environment part of the way to what SmartDeploy was able to help them realize right out of the gate. So there's a lot of benefit and added value to this product and the process that we follow. So on that note, Spencer, do you want to tell us about some more customer feedback quickly?
Yes, at the highest level, what we hear back from customers that have evaluated MDT and maybe perhaps struggled with it is with some of the benefit also comes some of the hard part of the flexibility. So with best practices not built right in, customers are left with too much rope to ultimately hang themselves, where they can configure it in so many different ways and they're not really sure what the right way to do it is and what the new technology terms are, and getting up to speed and familiar with that. So the net of it is customers are able to accomplish all of the goals that they wanted to with MDT using SmartDeploy at a fraction of the time and ultimate cost that they would end up spending using MDT when you factor in the training and the ramp-up time and the troubleshooting. So as Aaron mentioned earlier, we've got plenty of customers that have reduced the size of their teams and gotten their deployment projects done in a fraction of the time. Interestingly, the passmark results don't reflect the training and people ramp-up time to be able to use those tools. Passmark and others have had a baseline knowledge set to be able to just start using the tools, and then you start measuring time. But in the real-world scenario, those minutes matter. We're really confident about our product and that this will work for you. So we have a special promotion for everybody today, which is a trade-in program where we will compensate you for using a competitive product and giving SmartDeploy a shot. There's a no-risk, no-obligation trial. You can get yourself a pair of Skull Candy earbuds by attending a demo and giving the product a shot. The reality is we love talking about deployment and working with our customers, and we provide that high-touch experience that a lot of people like. It's a pretty stark contrast to the competitive landscape. So sign up at smartdeploy.com/challenge, and we'll get you up and running with the product. I know we had several questions come in, and we want to turn the time over to some Q&A. First one we kind of noticed was how we deal with application deployment, not only OS deployment, but application deployment. Eric, what are your thoughts on best practices for doing that with SmartDeploy?
Yeah, I think, again, this is one of the things that customers in general struggle with. It seems like such a great idea to sequence applications onto the end of the deployment, and that drastically increases the deployment time. Not to say that you can't do that within SmartDeploy. There's all the same task ability, but we really recommend as part of that planning tip, plan what applications you're going to sequence on. Get down to the least common denominator of software in the image, and then sequence on the less used things at the end, and that'll save you a bunch of time in deployment.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, we're right at 30 minutes. So we want to be respectful of your time. If you need to take off and head to another meeting, we totally understand. There are a bunch of questions coming in, so we're going to hang around for a few minutes and keep answering the questions. This session has been recorded, so we will send out a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the recording if you'd like to, move to the end of it and just listen to the Q&A if you need to take off now. We'll also send out in that email tomorrow a link to the full Passmark study, the full report, so that might also be something that's interesting for you to take a look at. We'll include links to a few other useful resources for you. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Like I said, we'll stick around and answer some more questions for you, but we really appreciate your time and hope you'll take a moment to take the SmartDeploy challenge and really see what SmartDeploy is all about. So some of the other questions we have, Rob wants to know how much our solution costs. Do you want to talk about licensing?
Yeah, for sure. So the product is licensed on what we call a per machine basis, and it's a perpetual license for the total number of machines in your environment that you're going to use the product on. The product also includes support for 1 year, and you can re-up the maintenance on an annual basis. The product is tiered based off of the size of your environment. So at the low end, if you've got 5 or 10 kind of machines, you may pay $50 per machine. But you start getting up to 1,000 seats up, the product with support drops closer to $16. And like I say, you can re-up the maintenance on an annual basis.
Okay, thanks, Spencer. We have some questions about our driver packs, our platform packs. Lauren wants to know how many different PC models we have pre-made driver packs for and how often we update them, and what it would be like if someone needed a platform pack that we don't have created. Can you request that one be created?
So a little bit of context here. The driver packs are a service that we provide as a function of our service and support agreements, and there's some specific policy around that. But Eric or Spencer, you want to elaborate a little
Yeah, in general, we've got the major business class OEMs all covered, from current models to up to 5 years back. If the model isn't listed and you have support, you can request that we make one for you. You can customize them to your heart's content, or you can make your own as well if you prefer to go that route. But in general, the experience is a quick download of a package that's pre-built and dedicated for the machine you're using in your environment. You can combine all of those so you can have sort of one file that deals with drivers for everything in your environment. Only the drivers that are needed on those target devices get applied. And we'll support XP forward as long as the OEM does that. Keep in mind we're downloading these drivers from the OEM. If we need to create a new one, the turnaround time is as short as 24 or 48 hours, but generally within a standard business week. It should be no problem with minimal impact to you. We send a little file for you to run on a target device and send it back to us to make the pack and post it.
Great. And since we're talking about drivers anyway, we'll answer this next question. How does SmartDeploy compare with the Universal Imaging Utility from Big Bang, so UIU?
Yeah, for sure. So UIU is a big driver collection, and you're reliant on them to go and download and make the drivers and send you the new updates. As we hear from customers, sometimes that time can be months and weeks for them to worry about that stuff, and customers have little, if any, control over how to make or modify UIU components. UIU is also a big driver blob. There's a real-time consideration there where the target device needs to sit and sort through that huge database and figure out what plug-and-play is going to allow and wants to work right for those machines. So there's some big downside there, not only time savings, but it's possible to get the wrong driver applied to that target machine. Of course, there's an additional expense with Big Bang versus SmartDeploy. Those things are included. And we stay on top of our driver library. When manufacturers come up with a new model, we iterate on that quite a bit as they do. But as machines age and stick around for a while, the drivers aren't generally updated quite as frequently. We can do all kinds of stuff and tasks and special customizations on a per model basis. Things like flashing the BIOS as part of deployment. That's all in box with SmartDeploy. That's in pretty stark contrast to UIU. The hardware independence piece is pretty different, where truly the image has no device drivers in SmartDeploy, and modularly, separately, is the driver pack, and you can make and maintain your software-specific information from your hardware information.
Thanks, Spencer. And we have a question about the SmartDeploy free trial. Does it have all the features of the full version?
Yep, it just dies after a couple weeks. If we need to continue working with you, we can extend it, but you're not out any work. with the trial, and you can play with all the whistles and bells. And we'll support you along the way in a trial capacity. We want to make sure you're up and running and happy with the product as well.
Thanks, Spencer. And we have a question. Travis wants to know if we can talk a little bit about SCCM integration, specifically with Pixie deployments.
Yeah, for sure. So SmartDeploy is based on pretty industry standard components, right? As Aaron mentioned earlier, we utilize the Windows imaging file format. We also built our boot media on top of Windows PE. So it's a highly customized version of Windows PE that keeps with the overall simplicity, however, power of the product. And that means it's all wizard-driven deployment from a Windows PE environment. Being that we use these standard components, we can integrate into a lot of different management software, including SCCM. So the SCCM integration, there's a full document on that up on SmartDeploy.com, which talks about how you can create a task sequence from SCCM to utilize Pixie deployment for SmartDeploy. So you'd boot your target devices from the SmartDeploy boot environment utilizing SCCM, and then you'd have access to all the driver management and image creation tools and everything that SmartDeploy uses. On top of that, integration with management suites, there's also another question about user setting migration and user configuration. So again, we can integrate with those industry standard components like the user state migration tool, which will provide that piece of user migration and user configuration settings.
Great, thank you, Eric. A couple other quick questions. We have somebody asking if SmartDeploy works also with Windows 7 OEM licensing. Eric, Windows 7 OEM licensing?
Yes, so Windows 7 OEM licensing would be utilized much the same way as just your volume license. And we can definitely help you with that offline, get you set up if you want to go through a trial.
Obviously Microsoft's changed the licensing rules between XP and 7 and so forth, but at the highest level, we work with retail, OEM, KMS, Mac, whatever licensing scenario you need to be a part of, we can support all those different scenarios. We had another question about user data, and I think the question's regarding default copy profile. Eric, do you want to let them know how we deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. We have some information from a support perspective on how to go through and do that copy profile, which has changed a lot from what IT administrators were used to in Windows XP of just copying files over the default profile. Now that it's changed a bit in Vista 7, Windows 8 going forward, of creating a default custom profile of, it's part of SysPrep now. So we'll definitely help you and support, even at a trial version. We can help you get that all set up for proof of concept.
Thanks, Eric. And we have someone asking about nonprofit pricing, Spencer?
Yep, we've got special pricing to take care of our education and nonprofit customers. We have special pricing for managed service providers. If you guys are a system integrator, managed service provider, and you use this tool as part of your business and not really in a resale capacity. We've got partner programs. If you are a product reseller and are interested in getting involved there, we have several different ways to engage based off of your use case in your business.
Thanks, Spencer. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. We went over by about 10 minutes, but glad to see that people are having questions and wanting to learn more. If there's anything that we didn't get to, we'll be happy to follow up with you and answer any questions you have. We hold a weekly demo of SmartDeploy. If you're interested in seeing SmartDeploy, in about 30 minutes we can run through a full deployment with SmartDeploy. That's a live demo every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So
there's a lot of time for Q&A in that session too. We kind of run through the getting started and tips and tricks and a few pointers to the product, but there's usually a good minimum of 15 minutes. We hang around to work with all you guys that are interested in joining, making time for that.
Yeah, so you can sign up for that at smartdeploy.com/demo. You can register for any Wednesday session for the next 4 weeks or so. So we're going to wrap things up. Thank you again for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time and hope that you learned a lot, and we'll take a moment to check out SmartDeploy. Thank you.